Welcome back. What a delight to have with us today Professor R.R. Reno, and he's also the editor of First Things Magazine, America's most influential journal on religion and public life. Previously taught ethics and theology as a professor. He's the author of quite a few books, Fighting the Noonday Devil, In the Ruins of the Church, and I want to talk to him today about his latest book, fascinating, Resurrecting the Idea of a Christian Society. And there's a picture of it there on the screen. I'm sure you can check it out at the bookstores or look for it at Amazon as well. And Professor Reno, good to see you. How you doing, my friend?
Great to be with you.
Good to be with you. All right, so what do you mean by a Christian society?
Well, it doesn't mean that everybody's Christian, but it does mean that Christianity shapes the moral and the political imagination of our country. And I think we used to be a Christian society with a Christian politics, but we've become more of a pagan society with pagan politics. Well, often people think we're a secular society, but I think that's a misguided idea. I think Christianity is actually necessary to have a sustainable secular politics. But that without Christianity, we wind up adopting what I would call a pagan politics.
So resurrecting this idea, is that somewhat of an admission that we've lost it?
I think so. I don't think probably listeners have too hard of a time imagining that things have taken a significant change over the last couple generations. My intuition is that we have a society that is organized around what I call the hearth gods of our time, and they are health, wealth, and pleasure. And they seem to be what really organize our moral imaginations and our political imaginations. And that's partly explains why we're in a kind of period of unsettled politics, in part because those gods are not very satisfying.
Interesting. Professor Reno, can I get you to lean in just a little bit more towards the microphone? Thank you. So this is fascinating to me because it seems that, well, it's been said that the church probably gets an A in evangelism, but a D- in discipleship. Would you agree with that?
Well, it's hard to walk the walk, and it's easy to talk, and Christians are just as guilty of that as anybody is. And there's no doubt that the strength of our witness really depends upon the integrity of our lives. And so going forward, my hope that we can renew the influence of Christianity in America is going to depend on the integrity of our lives, the integrity of our communities, and not just the talk that we talk, either in the pulpit or in the public square. So I think you're quite right on that.
How did we lose our influence in the public square? I mean, right now, I can tell you when I am introduced to speak at say a public setting, I'll be introduced as the Christian broadcaster as some kind of an indication that I'm a Christian, so therefore it's a down thing, not a plus thing. You know what I'm talking about?
We don't have to take that guy too seriously. He's a Christian broadcaster. Yeah. Well, I think the big change is the most important change in the religious landscape of America has been the transformation of mainline Protestantism from a movement that was closely connected to Christianity to essentially transmuted itself into secular progressivism. And so our elite culture is now dominated by this very moralistic secular progressivism, which often we experience in the form of political correctness. So our establishment, our institutions that prepare people for leadership are, again, they're not secular in the sense, they're secular in the sense that it's not God-oriented, but they have their own evangelistic strategies. As we all know, if we send our kids off to university, the universities are, as one of my friends referred to the university as the secular church. It's a place where they try to form people to develop this progressive view of culture and politics.
So what happens to doctrinal purity in all of this?
Well, it becomes more important, right? I mean, one of the advantages of being pushed to the side a bit in American society is that, we can be clear about who we are. This is a real opportunity for Christians to sort of double down on the gospel message, and we don't have to make compromises. I mean, you get kicked out of the university, and it's an opportunity to really focus on what it is that, why am I a Christian? I mean, as our society becomes more punitive of Christians, it's a chance to clarify and purify our own witness.
Given the two candidates running for president, Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, is that, to me, it's further evidence that the church, we Christians, have lost our influence in the culture, that we could produce two people like this as being the candidates. And I know that sounds very disrespectful to each one of them, and I don't mean that to be, but boy, they are different, and they don't seem to be representing our values.
No, and I think you're absolutely right and not just that they don't represent our values, which I think you're quite right about that, but also they have these very high disapproval ratings. And it suggests that there's a lot of unhappiness in our political culture, that it could produce these two candidates that have such high disapproval ratings. And this is correlated with the decline of influence of Christianity. Christianity is a very powerful unifying force in society. And as Christianity's influence over our public culture decreases, we're more at each other's throats. And I think part of the role of Christianity in America historically has been to provide a point of unity for us. And we don't have that. That's part of our problem.
It appears now that society wants to return to some form of moral order, but the political elite don't. Is that a struggle?
Well, in my book, I develop fairly extensively a kind of analysis of why our elites are so comfortable with what I call non-judgmentalism. It's not really moral relativism because nobody says it's okay to murder or steal, but it's what I call moral minimalism or non-judgmentalism. The idea that you want to give people as much room as possible to sort of make up their own lives as they see fit. And this seems to work for people at the high end of the social ladder. They seem to be able to navigate through life without guardrails. But for ordinary folks, need guardrails. And for most of us, we don't have all these advantages, and so we've got to get good guidance to get us moving in the right direction. But our elite culture does not provide that guidance for ordinary folk. And in fact, it's positively hostile to it on the ground. I mean, we're reaching the point now where we're not even allowed to speak clearly to young people about the difference between being a man and being a woman, with this whole transgender ruckus that's ripping through our society imposed upon us by progressive elites. And this disorients ordinary people. So the rich have the capacity to navigate. They send their kids to private schools where the teachers tell them to make healthy choices and to not do anything that might be hurtful and things like that. That's a kind of coded way of passing on a kind of upper middle class moral code, whereas they strip away that possibility from the schools that teach poor kids in the inner city who need clear moral guidance.
That is a great observation. Let me take a break here. Professor Reno, he's with us today. He's the author of his new book entitled Resurrecting the Idea of a Christian Society. You can get the book at bookstores or check it out at Amazon. There's a picture up there on the screen by R.R. Reno. And we'll take a quick break. We'll come back and talk a little more.
I'm Paulina Leiser, producer of Focus Today. Thank you for watching this video, and make sure to check our other videos at theDove.us.
Welcome back, and having a delightful conversation today with Professor R.R. Reno. He's the editor of First Things magazine. He's authored several books, teaches ethics and theology, but his latest book is fascinating, Resurrecting the Idea of a Christian Society. By the way, Professor Reno, do you have a website?
Indeed, firstthings.com, the magazine. We do new material every day, and that also provides a link for viewers to buy the book.
Okay, firstthings.com. All right, a couple things here that you deal with in the book. You're saying that tolerance, as it's being thrusted upon us, really isn't possible unless we have a Christian society. Explain that.
Well, you know, one of the contributions that religiosity, Christianity makes to a society, makes a secular society or secular politics possible, is that we know, as Jesus teaches us, that his kingdom is not of this world. And so as a result, we don't make a god of politics. The danger of secular progressivism is that it makes a god of politics. And if we don't make a god of politics, we realize that our ultimate destiny is beyond the political realm. It's above, not here and now. That lowers the blood pressure and lets us be more tolerant of the fact that we live in a society that's imperfect, that people around us disagree, maybe even have false views. But we can live with that because we realize that we're not going to achieve the ultimate values of Christianity through politics. And again, the secular progressivist is tempted to turn politics into a god. And then that becomes a kind of a tyranny as the political system has to manifest the values of our secular progressivism. We see this with the religious liberty issues. You know, you would think that somebody making wedding cakes or a florist, I mean, why does that florist have to affirm a gay marriage? It's not like it's hard to find a florist, but it's because the only hope is not a hope in the beyond, but a hope in this world, leads the secularist to actually become much more politically intolerant than the Christian. So I think it's exactly the opposite of what our popular culture says. Our popular culture says, oh, those Christians, they're dogmatists that are intolerant. No, on the contrary, I think Christians are quite capable of recognizing the limitations of the political. We're also aware of our own sin, and we recognize that you know, we're all fallible human beings, and that makes us a lot less judgmental than the secular progressives. I mean, hell hath no fury than a secular progressive who encounters somebody that they've decided is a bigot.
It appears with this pushback now, as you look at this election cycle, there seems to be a pushback against, I don't know, elitism or politics or whatever. But part of this pushback is, or let me ask you, could it be that the culture is waking up? We don't want this immoral world. We don't want to have transgender bathrooms. We don't want our children's distinctive of being a little boy and a little girl mixed into just saying you're a student. It appears to be more than just a church pushing back. Would you agree?
There's a lot of dissatisfaction out there. A lot of dissatisfaction with our political establishment. We saw that in the Sanders vote, and we saw that with the Trump vote. And it's important for listeners to realize that our political establishment is not dominated by Christianity. No, on the contrary, the last generation has seen pushing of Christianity out of the public sphere. And so I think that, and there's a lot of dissatisfaction in the universities. I mean, what part of America is more dominated by the secular progressive view than the university culture? And there you have young women who are worried about sexual assault. You've got minority students that are upset about their role in the universities. You've got the decline in the study of the humanities. These are not happy places. And so I think that there's a growing sense that whatever we've got, it's not working. And this should be good news for us because you know, the university system is not governed by evangelical pastors in Texas. You know, the public schools are in trouble. They're not being run by Catholic bishops. You know, financial crisis of 2008, the global financial system was not constructed by the religious right. So, you know, a lot of what's being discredited in the distempers of this particular political moment is the world that was constructed over the last generation or two by secular progressives.
That's a great observation. So how does the church, the Christian church, take advantage of this moment?
Stand strong. Number one thing. Two things. Stand strong, but that's going to require us not to internalize, you know, a second-class citizenship that's being imposed upon us. And I think that's really a great danger for us, is that we need to speak the truth in love. We need to find a voice for our fellow citizens that they can hear us and hear that we are concerned about their well-being. We're not out there to make them feel bad about themselves. But we got to do that in a way that doesn't back away from the truths that we affirm and hold dear. Not just the truths of the gospel, but also natural truths about the human condition. And one of the key ones today is the difference between a man and a woman. What could be more fundamental? What could be more needful for a young person who's struggling to understand what it means to be a man or what it means to be a woman? So we need to, you know, continue to speak the truth and stand strong.
Are we at a crossroads? I think you talk about it in reference, but are we at a crossroads between a Christian society and a pagan one? I mean, we've been working our way there, but
right.
This election cycle appears to be more pronounced that we're going to make a choice here, even though the candidates aren't pristine in what we want. But we're going to make a choice. Are we going to retain some Christian virtue or give it all over to paganism?
Right, right. I don't think this election, the choice of the two candidates are quite clear. In other words, the difference between a pagan society and a Christian society has to do with whether or not what gods we're worshiping. Is our political culture organized around material well-being exclusively? And if it is, that's a kind of paganism. Have we made a kind of false god of diversity? That's another kind of paganism. You know, and so I think that the distemper, the conflict, the dissatisfaction we all feel with our political choices right now is a bad sign for our country. You know, it doesn't feel like it felt, at least to me, a generation ago, where, yeah, of course you have disagreements about what direction the country should go. Of course you have disagreements about policies and so on. That's the natural part of politics. But you basically trusted the guy on the other side to be pulling towards the same goal. We don't feel that way anymore.
Yeah.
That's not good.
You mentioned earlier about Christians having a position or a foresight of something beyond this life, an eternal perspective. And the eternal perspective, so those who don't have an eternal perspective has to turn this world into their heaven.
Right, and that's the danger there is tyranny.
Yeah.
And because if you have to turn this world into the heaven, you got to get rid of sin, right? Hey, that's going to take some pretty heavy machinery.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, I mean, one of the goals, I mean, part of the whole transgender thing is a desire that everybody be affirmed and accepted. And these poor kids, you know, that don't know whether they're male or female, you know, we should have compassion. We should do everything we can to try to help them. But the secular progressive has a kind of horror at the idea that anyone would feel excluded. And so they have to deconstruct the very reality of male and female to make our society more so-called inclusive. But that's a very ideological project that we see as it invades the most intimate parts of our lives. And that's one of the elements of tyranny. Tyranny is when the government comes into the bedroom, or in this case, the bathroom, and tells us how to behave. That's a kind of a tyranny. And again, that really has to do with the fact that not just that these are false views, but they're false views being put forward by folks who have no eternal orientation, and that are compelled to make our public life into some kind of perfect community, which is not possible. There's no sense of the tragic dimension of life, which I think as a Christian we recognize. I remember one of my favorite philosopher, Hank Williams, one of his songs, he says, "No matter how I struggle and strive, I'm never going to get out of this world alive." And that's a good Christian recognition that we're not going to find our final happiness in this world, and that there is agony, there is suffering, there is pain in this life, and we cannot get rid of it. No matter how well-intentioned we are, no matter how just our society is. And I feel like we're in the grips of a kind of secular utopianism that imagines it can get rid of all that. It's kind of crazy.
All right, I got about 2 minutes left, Professor Reno. Let me ask you the big question. Is it possible to resurrect the idea of a Christian society? In other words, do you think the conditions of our culture now provide us an opportunity to return to that Christian-based society?
People have accused me of being an unrealistically optimistic person. A serotonin donor, as one of my friends described me.
Yeah.
But I would say this: the bad news is these are troubled times. The good news is that these are troubled times, because the troubles that we're experiencing are going to discredit the secular elites who are currently running our country. This doesn't mean we're going to return to Christianity. Maybe not. Maybe we'll move to something else. But it does mean that we may be entering a time when our fellow citizens are willing to say, hey, wait a minute. You know, the current regime, cultural regime, it's not working for me. Maybe I ought to listen to those Christian folk down the street. Maybe they have something to say. So we could be entering a time in these troubled times when our neighbors are more open to the idea, our message, more open to the idea that, hey, these Christian folk, you know, they might have some good ideas about how to make America more hospitable, more just, and a place where people can flourish and thrive.
Dr. Reno, does your fellow academics, how do they perceive you? How do they see you?
They see me as, I hope they see me as a kind, cheerful madman. So I'm like you. I get introduced as the Christian academic.
Yeah.
But I do think it's a good sign. There's an important message we all need to realize, that even in environments that are hostile, that the gestures of love really do take you a long, long way to open people's hearts.
Thank you for your time. You're inspiring. Let me say to our viewers, check out his new book called Resurrecting the Idea of Christian Society. There's a picture there on the screen. Check it out at the bookstores. Also, go to firstthings.com. That's the website there for First Things Magazine, and you can correspond with him there. And also check out some of his other writings. Thank you, Dr. Reno. Let's connect again, okay?
All right, thanks, Perry, for having me on the show.
All right, God bless you. All right, we'll see you next time on Focus Today.